I think we're ready to get started. If John sits down. Nothing like getting called out, right, John? Oh, boy. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I am Amy Wildermuth, the Dean of this terrific law school, and I am honored to welcome you all to our inaugural 2022 Judge Aldisert Distinguished Jurist Awards. I am simply overwhelmed looking around this room. We have so many incredible guests who have joined us, including judges from all over the state and nation, the Aldisert family, and Aldisert clerks. It is a special moment for our law school as we come together to honor the life and legacy of one of Pitt Law's most outstanding graduates, Judge Aldisert, as well as two exceptional jurists, Judge Scirica and Justice Todd. This event was several years in the making. We had hoped to bring everyone together in 2020, but we all know how 2020 went. With the steadfast support of John Getz and Judge Fisher, no matter what the hurdle, they kept coming back to me to plan this event again and again, and finally, our day has arrived. I could not be happier. I hope you will join me in thanking John Getz, Judge Fisher, and Judge Sindrich, who's joining us virtually, who bore the biggest loads to put today together. Thank you. I also want to thank the Pitt Law staff and our broader Pitt Law community for your support of this event. I must especially note Amy Change, Deb Geary, and Corey Parisi for all they have done to make things go smoothly today. Thank you to our Pitt Law team. Now, one of the things that inspired today's event, and you will hear from them later today, is the love that Judge Aldisert's clerks have for him and the transformative role he played in their development as lawyers, professionals, and people. As I thought about today, I pulled out some of my old mementos from clerking and was reminded of the inscription on one of the photos I received from Justice Stevens at the end of my time with him, which has the same inscription that his boss, Justice Rutledge, had included in the photo he gave Justice Stevens after his clerkship. To my friend and former clerk, with appreciation and affection. I'm always struck by that line because in its brevity, it managed to capture the very best of what it means to clerk and the relationship between a clerk and our boss. There is something profound about clerking and the opportunity to be part of the judicial process that one cannot fully absorb without being part of it. I learned the seriousness of purpose with which every person came to their work, the dignity and respect afforded to all parties that come before the court, the lengths and depths one was required to go to fully analyze the issues, and the very high bar set for one's effort and work. And most importantly, the genuine humanity of those who hold these important roles. I had, in each of the judges I worked for, mentors that have lasted me a lifetime, a kindness and love that I hold dear to, and that steadies me in uncertain waters, and an appreciation for the work, the very hard work that judges do day in and day out. And being a judge in this day and age is no easy ride. With a country so deeply polarized, it can be hard not to see every result, every ruling, every order in terms of being for one side or another. So I want to send a special message to all the judges here today. Thank you. Thank you for your seriousness of purpose, for doing the job you have been entrusted with for the betterment of our society, and for your dedicated and tireless efforts to ensure equal justice for all. We see you, and we are truly grateful for the work you do. And as a former clerk, thank you for the opportunity, the lessons and mentorship you provide to those you work with, the affection, the deep love we feel for you, and for what you have given us is the rock on which most of us build our career and lives. It profoundly changed my life and is why I stand before you today. Each time you invest in a law student or graduate, yes, we make mistakes. We take time to train. My bosses would tell you I sure did. Some might even say it is still an ongoing process. But know how much it means to us and how much impact it has on everything that follows in our work. So speaking of deep impact, it's now the time for us to celebrate Judge Aldisert. So I hope you will join me in welcoming up here to the podium, Dr. Lisa Aldisert, one of Judge Aldisert's children, to tell us more about the judge.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. And thank you, everybody who is here this afternoon. And I might be saying this evening because there's no window in here that would show me that it's still light out. Anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today representing my family. And my mother, Agatha, and my brother, Rob, send virtual greetings. And my brother, Greg, who is right over there, joins me in this welcome. One of my goals here was that John Getz is an infinite repository of information and stories about my father. And I'm hoping that something that I have in this tonight will give him something new, give him some new information to use, but we'll see. Anyway, 3 institutions primarily informed who the judge was as a person. They were the law, the University of Pittsburgh, and the U.S. Marine Corps. Today's event speaks to the intersection of the law and Pitt, but because I don't want lightning to strike by omitting the Marines, I will give an early memory. By the age of 2, I knew all 3 verses of the Marine Corps hymn. Yep, we sang this together regularly. Foregoing any pedestrian children's tunes like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Why do that when you could sing and memorize at a young age? As I was a little older, I wondered whether he thought that I would absorb some of the Marines' core values of honor, courage, and commitment by singing those verses into my little toddler brain. He certainly embodied those characteristics. The judge was the second of 3 children of Italian-American immigrants who lived in the outskirts of Pittsburgh. He enrolled at Pitt as an undergraduate in 1937 and was the editor-in-chief of the Pitt News. Pitt Law School followed, but was interrupted early because he enlisted in the Marines in December of 41 after the invasion of Pearl Harbor. Upon graduating from law school, he pursued a law career as a sole practitioner. Using today's vernacular, he was a master networker. He knew tons of people, often helping them as they were launching their careers. And every Monday, he'd send his secretary, Mrs. Lima, to buy a box of Cuban cigars, which he shared liberally with people he met along the way. How times have changed. He was elected to the Court of Common Pleas for Allegheny County in 1961 and took up residence in the City County building in Courtroom 3. He was appointed calendar control judge for the civil docket. During this term, the resolution of civil cases was reduced from 3 to 5 years to less than a year. He developed a reputation as an excellent settlement judge, known in those days as a conciliation judge. Civil lawyers quaked when they had conciliation conferences with the judge, as they would either settle or they would know that they were on the calendar with an immovable trial date. One of his early hires was John Bodner, his tipstaff. A tipstaff is like a bailiff in other courts. The duties of a tipstaff are to assist the judge and to basically run the courtroom. John was also a Marine, and in fact, he was the judge's platoon sergeant. So you can just imagine this dynamic. John ran the courtroom like any good Marine sergeant would do, setting the stage for accountability and discipline for all who appeared in court. The judge used to say that no one could warm up a room like John, warm up the jury, that is. He advised them, when the judge leans back, closes his eyes, and steeples his fingers, he's not sleeping, he's thinking hard. And if he catches you sleeping, he might be nice, but I won't be. In 1968, he was appointed to the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit by President Lyndon Johnson, where he remained for 46 years, 5 months before his death. He was an active judge until 1985, when he became chief judge. He stepped down as chief in 1987 and became a senior judge. During his 46 years on the court, he sat on literally thousands of cases. It's hard to pick out one as being most important because all of them are important to all of the parties involved in each case. Of note, one of the judge's first mentors as an appellate judge was Judge William Hastie, who was the first African-American to serve as the governor of the United States Virgin Islands, the first African-American as a federal judge, and as a federal appellate judge. He was also very well known, and I think mostly known for being a well-known civil rights attorney. I was fortunate to meet Judge Hastie, and he made an impression immediately. One of my father's highest profile cases was affirming the release of Reuben Hurricane Carter, an African-American champion boxer who had been unjustly convicted for murder by the state court. The judge sat on a panel that affirmed the release of Carter from prison based on his, released Carter from prison on his unjust conviction on a habeas corpus proceeding. As a footnote, Bob Dylan memorialized this episode in his song entitled Hurricane. In addition to judicial matters, the judge had numerous interests. He was a prolific legal scholar. He wrote or co-wrote over 100 law review articles, over 8 books, chaired various committees, including the Bankruptcy Rules Committee, which rewrote the arcane and ponderous federal bankruptcy rules. Throughout his life, Pitt was always a priority. He served on the Board of Trustees of the university. One of the things he was most proud about was in the 70s, when he chaired a committee that managed student relationships between the board and the administration with the students. He was proud that they were able to keep their relationship civil, productive, and on track, while at other universities, this relationship between students and the administration often ran off the rails. He was an influencer who encouraged the appointment of Mark Nordenberg, now Chancellor Emeritus here at Pitt, first as the Dean of Pitt's Law School, and later as the Chancellor of the university. The judge and the Chancellor enjoyed a close, warm, lifelong friendship. His Pitt resume also includes an important, albeit less public, chapter when he served as a lecturer in the law school for years. And this is a great time to introduce our extended family members, 2 of whom you'll hear from later in this program. His law clerks. and your comments about law clerks are spot on. He cherished these relationships and embraced each of them, not just in their professional capacities, but personally. He welcomed them to his home, and it's fair to say that they knew my mother well and my brothers and me while we were still homebound prior to going to college. He had a love of travel and was able to combine this interest with lecturing overseas. He felt there was an insatiable interest in American law in the legal communities in other countries, and eagerly pursued opportunities to broaden his understanding of international law. The breadth of these travels extended across Western and Eastern Europe, from Italy to Poland to Germany to Hungary. He was especially interested in the distinctions between the common law, on which the British and American legal systems are based, and civil law, which is based on the Napoleonic Code. One of the key themes that I see as my father's legacy is mentorship. He welcomed mentorship himself and paid it forward to his law clerks. In addition to welcoming them to our family, he encouraged their careers and interests. Over the years, at various law clerk reunions, I would hear story after something the judge did or said informed career direction and professional pursuits. So that's a snapshot. I know that if he was here, he'd be thrilled to have this program named in his honor. Thank you to Dean Wildermuth and Judge Fisher and the steering committee of John Getz, Gene Schoon, and Bob Sindrich to make this happen. They relentlessly persevered as this idea was birthed long before the pandemic, and it didn't collapse during the pandemic. And today that vision is coming to life. On behalf of my family, thank you for making this a reality, and our warmest congratulations to Judge Scirica and Justice Todd. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So now I'm going to invite my partner in all things, Judge Fisher, to come on up and introduce our first honoree, Judge Fisher.
Thank you very much, Dean Amy, and really kudos to Dean Amy for her persistence in keeping this program on track, and perhaps most importantly, with her ingenuity in conceiving the idea of the Distinguished Jurist Awards named after our colleague and great friend, Judge Ruggero J. Aldisert. In listening to Lisa give some of the history of her father, it reminds me that when I was growing up and was a young member of the legal community, and my father would always tell me about how he had a friend from years back who was on the court, and at that point was on the Third Circuit, by the name of Ruggero Aldisert. And he talked about his friendship, but I never quite ever figured out how they became friends, other than they were longtime practitioners in Pittsburgh. So I got to the Third Circuit in 2003, and sometime in the next year, I had the opportunity to sit with Judge Aldisert. And although at that point, Judge Aldisert sat virtually, he was way ahead of his time. Okay, he was sitting virtual at that point, and he sat with the court, and we talked beforehand, we talked afterwards, and we heard cases remotely, something that people thought was just new in 2000. Rugi started a long time before that. And one of the conversations I had with him, I said, "How did you ever know my father?" And he said, "Oh," he said, "your father," he talked about him, and he said, "You have to understand," he said, "I had to make a buck back in those days when I was in these organizations, and I represented a lot of developers, and one of them was the Casti family who built Castee Village over in Whitehall. And he said, at that time, your father was a solicitor in the growing township of Upper St. Clair. And he said, nothing would ever get done legally without Fran Fisher making sure that it was correct for the township and correct for all the parties. And he said, that's how I got to know your dad. So, I learned a little bit of family history from Ruby. But it was a great friendship that we shared for too short of a period of time. And it brings me to the task I have this afternoon to introduce to you a longtime friend of mine. Tony Scirica and I both served together in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, me for a 6-year period, Tony for, I think, an 8-year period. He was there before I was. Tony and our Chief Judge, Mike Jurist, were just in my chambers, and I was showing them the picture of the 1979-80 session of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. And in that picture, there were 5 members of the House Judiciary Committee on the Republican side of the aisle at that time who became federal judges. 3 became members of the Court of Appeals. Tony was the bright one. We knew he was going to get there. Bill Hutchinson, whose term was cut short all too quickly, and myself, and then 2 members who made it to the district court, Bill Yawn in the Eastern District, and Terry McVeary in the Western District of Pennsylvania. And that was a marvelous statistic. I was telling my students in my class yesterday about that we had an opportunity to serve together way back then with some distinguished colleagues in the legislature. And as I said, everybody knew Tony was going to get to where he eventually ended up. In 1980, he left us. He ran for the Common Pleas Court in Montgomery County. In 1984, President Reagan appointed him to the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. And then the incredible connection that partially brings us here today. When Aldisert took senior status at the end of 1986, it was Tony Scirica who was appointed by President Reagan to replace Aldisert on the Third Circuit. And his career from that point on became legendary among federal jurists and among the judiciary all across this country. Ironically, when I got to the Third Circuit in 2003, Tony was the chief judge. And what a great help he was to me and so many others. In 2008, Chief Justice John Roberts named Tony Scirica to be the chair of the Executive Committee of the Judicial Conference of the United States. In 2011, Tony was elected to the Council of the American Law Institute, a very, very prestigious position among scholars of the law in this great country of ours. He also served as chair of the Judicial Conference's Committee on Judicial Conduct and Disability, and continues as a member today of the Committee on International Relations. Judge Anthony Scirica is known to all of us in the legal community as a giant. He's a giant in the law. He has had and continues to maintain the utmost respect of every member of the judiciary who has ever come in contact with him. And when Dean Amy and I and John and others began discussing who may be appropriate honorees to serve and to receive this prestigious award in Judge Aldisert's honor, I couldn't think of anyone who was better suited, who was more deserving to be honored this award than my good friend. And on behalf of all of our colleagues, Mike Jurist, Tom, Peter Phipps, Dick Nygaard, I don't know if Dave Porter's here or not, we're all so proud. We are all so proud and Patty Schwartz. I see her over in the corner. We are also proud that Judge Anthony Scirica, someone who led our court for many years, and I should say not only continues to serve, but continues to serve as a senior fellow at the University of Pennsylvania School of Law. We're all excited. We're all very excited that Judge Anthony Scirica, together with Justice Debra Todd, are our first honorees. And with that, I would ask you, Tony, come on up, and congratulations, my friend.
It says, University of Pittsburgh School of Law, Judge Ruggero, J. Aldisert, Distinguished Jurist, Judge Anthony Scirica. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike. I'm a bit overwhelmed. And Ruggie was such a wonderful human being that I'm almost hesitant to talk about him because he had a strong influence on my career as a judge and on my life as a human being. I am deeply touched and very grateful to the University of Pittsburgh for this wonderful award in honor of an extraordinary judge who was a valued friend and a fine mentor. And it is entirely fitting that the award comes from the University of Pittsburgh that played such a formative role in Ruggie's life. And we heard a lot about that from Lisa. And I found so much of that familiar, having grown up in an Italian-American family. And his book, The Road to the Robes, also touched me in many ways that only someone who was the son of immigrants or grandson of immigrants would appreciate. It's a distinct honor to receive this award with Justice Debra Todd, soon to be Chief Justice. Pennsylvania is indeed fortunate. And I'm deeply grateful as well to my esteemed colleagues on the Third Circuit and on the District Court. I'm especially grateful to my wonderful colleague, Judge Michael Fisher. As you heard, a best friend of many years since our days together as young lawyers on the Pennsylvania House Judiciary Committee. I have learned so much from all of them, and some of them are here in the courtroom today. Their Chief Judge, Mike Chigaris, Judge Tom Hardiman, Judge Peter Phipps, and Judge Patty Schwartz. And I hope I didn't miss anyone here. Pardon? Oh, and Judge David Porter. I did see you. Tomorrow we know that Judge Fisher will have his portrait presented to the court and to the courthouse, the Judge Wise Courthouse. And I know that many of you will be there to pay him honor. Well, Ruggie Aldisert was a great judge by any measure. For more than 40 years, he served with great distinction on the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. And in his final years as an active judge, he was a magnificent chief judge. Ruggie took responsibility, and he was in charge of that court. Chief judge has the obligation to make sure the ship doesn't get off course. And then beyond that, to do what he or she can to improve the administration of justice. Ruggie did all of those things. And I first got to know him at the judicial conferences. I was a district judge at the time. And I saw how good he was, how confident he was, how gracious he was, how humorous he was, and how he created the kind of atmosphere that people could flourish in, whether they were judges or law clerks or secretaries or officers of the court. It was really extraordinary. It is true that I have a personal connection with Ruggie because in 1987, I was nominated by President Reagan to fill the seat that Ruggie vacated in 1986 when he became a senior judge. But then I was assigned to Ruggie's chambers on the penthouse floor of the federal courthouse in Philadelphia. And our good mutual friend, Leon Higginbotham, who occupied the chambers down the hall, came in one day and said, "Do you think Ruggie left any cigars around?" Well, we made a search. We couldn't find any. But we went out and got some cigars and smoked them in his honor. There's another story that I love to think of, because Leon and Ruggie were such close friends. And during the time that I was getting acclimated to the court, Leon walked down the hall, as he often did, and saw a bucket with water leaking into it. And I had inquired about this leakage, and I was told that it was coming from the roof, and we were on the top floor, so that made sense. And I tried to get it fixed, and to no avail. And I told Leon I tried to get it fixed. And he said, "Let me tell you one thing, Tony, if Ruggie were still here, that roof wouldn't dare to leak." And he said it with a twinkle in his eye, and we all got a kick out of it. In any forum or gathering, Ruggie was charismatic, articulate, warm and engaging, kind and generous. His was a full life so wonderfully described in his memoir, The Road to the Robes, which, as I said earlier, brought up so many fond memories for me of my Italian-American upbringing. We all know that one of Ruggie's closest friends was another legendary judge from Pittsburgh, Judge Joseph Wise. Ruggie and Joe served together on the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas, and then were colleagues on the Third Circuit for more than 40 years. Joe, too, had served in World War II and had been wounded in France. I would like to borrow from Joe Weiss's foreword to Ruggie's memoir, Road to the Robes. He placed Judge Aldisert among those in the greatest generation, for whom the Great Depression and World War II provided a testing ground for certain persons of uncommon achievement. He had no hesitation placing Ruggie Aldisert in that rare category. Joe highlighted the many stages of Ruggie's distinguished career. He noted that early in his life, Ruggie encountered bigotry, in some instances in its aggravated form. Joe said, "The white robes of the Ku Klux Klan that Ruggie confronted in his boyhood helped to shape his black robe thinking on discrimination and equality." Noting Ruggie's remarkable career as judge and law professor, Judge Weiss observed that much of that work ethic came from his childhood, but much of the self-discipline and goal setting were the result of his service in the Marine Corps in the Pacific during World War II. Noting his Marine Corps training and experience, Ruggie himself said, "You can't be a good lawyer or a good judge unless you possess a profound sense of preparedness and responsibility." Remembering Ruggie today reminds us of the virtues of duty, responsibility, and service. Service to family and friends, service to faith, service to community, and certainly service to country. In a life full of challenges, he embraced responsibility with brilliance, enthusiasm, and fairness. Throughout his distinguished career, Ruggie was most fortunate to have the loving and uncompromising support of his wonderful wife, Agatha, and his wonderful family. During his many years on the Court of Appeals, Ruggie was an apostle of collegiality. More than 20 years ago, Ruggie gave an oral history to the Third Circuit Historical Society. His interlocutor was his close friend, Judge Wise. Ruggie joined the court in 1968 and Joe in 1973. They reminisced together about the extraordinary judges they encountered in the Third Circuit, each with powerful intellect. The judges did not always agree on the outcome of a case, but nonetheless, it was a highly congenial court. The rare thing about the court, said Ruggie, was they could disagree at conference, and often did. But the last thing they discussed at conference was where they were all going to have dinner together that evening. Ruggie said, "It was beautiful." And so I come to an end. During his time in senior service, Ruggie and I talked quite often. And it was a wonderful experience. It made me wish that he were still coming with frequency to hear cases. He talked about the court, his life on the court, which he greatly, all of whom whom he greatly admired. He talked about the state of the law. He was very interested in how it was progressing and what could be done to make it better. He was interested, as Lisa said, in what was happening in other countries with civil law systems. And he talked about his travels with Agatha, and especially his travels to Italy, and we were able to share many mutual experiences together. So for me, it was a beautiful relationship. And I can't tell you how much this award means to me. So I thank you, Dean Amy. I thank you, John. Thank you, my dear friend, Mike Fisher. And
now it's my great pleasure to invite up another clerk, our first clerk, I should say, from the Judge Aldisert family, Jean Schoon. Come on up.
Thank you, Dean, John, everyone who had a part in this. When the Dean and John asked me if I would say a few words about the clerkship experience, I know I accepted too quickly. Not because I'm afraid of speaking, but because it was the few words that are the real challenge here for a former law clerk. The last time I walked into a classroom here at Pitt was about 40 years ago, a little more than 40 years ago. So we're here again at the school that the judge loved. And for those of you who clerked for the judge here in Pittsburgh, you may remember the ritual. Every Thursday afternoon, we'd march out of chambers, the judge and the 3 law clerks. We'd jump into the Saab, And we drive here together to campus. Then we march into the classroom together, the law clerks lining up on the back in our suits. The law students were kind of amused by this. And the word got back somehow to the judge that they started calling us the Pips. And the judge asked us after class one day, he said, "What is this? I know what a Pip is. A Pip is kind of a nice person. Like, you know, he's a Pip of a guy. What is this about?" So we had to give him a little lesson on Gladys Knight and the Pips on the way home and the cultural references. And, you know, it stuck from there. So at one point, to let the students know that we were in on the joke, we made up T-shirts that said Ruggie and the Pips and wore them into the class. We also had an honorary Pip who was Larry, our faithful janitor at the federal court building, or the federal building downtown. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun in chambers, though the work was serious. The judge was demanding, and as all you clerks know, we worked very hard and often long hours. We used the 2 law clerk method to look at every case, with the first law clerk taking the lead on a bench memo, and then the second law clerk critiquing the memo and doing a second look at the things, all of which were geared to looking at Judge Aldisert's dictated bench memo. We were supposed to challenge him, which is a little bit daunting. It was competitive, but the law clerks were not out to get each other. We weren't up for partner or anything like that, but we helped each other out a great deal. We dared not make any errors. We could disagree with the judge, and I did, but we had to be prepared for a cross-examination like no witness would ever experience. What was the logic of that position? What are the fallacies? Where in the record did you find that? And most important, is there an RJA case on point? Because you learned as a law clerk that if you really wanted to persuade him, one of the things you could do would be to find an Aldisert clerk where he had said something and cite it back to him. It was a point of pride in our chambers, and by no means the only one, that the judge was better prepared than any of the other judges on the panel. He always presided when I was a law clerk because he was the second most senior. Judge Colin Seitz was the chief at the time. And we never sat together, so we always got the best opinions and the best dissents. The judge believed in timeliness, military time. The opinions were always on time. Sittings were about 4 or 5 weeks apart. And I think in my 2 years, there was not a single occasion when a majority opinion that we were assigned was not finished and circulated before the next sitting. Nor was there an opinion from another chambers that sat on his desk for more than a day before he voted or provided comments. We couldn't say the same for the turnaround in the other chambers. The judge believed that being a judge required working as hard or harder than the litigants. He tolerated no shortcuts or guesswork. He believed in the rules and followed them rigorously. He was a guardian of jurisdiction, precedent, the common law process. He wrote opinions only in cases where he thought it mattered to the development of the law. And when he did, his opinions were clear and the litigants knew the reasons whether they won or lost. He could be at times merciless to the poorly prepared lawyer who appeared before him, the lawyer who had not read the Third Circuit rules or the internal operating procedures of the court. In fact, the judge was very proud of the fact that the Third Circuit, I think at the time, was the only court that published its internal operating procedures. So judges or lawyers were expected to know how the court operated. Although he was appointed by Lyndon Johnson, I don't think politics ever entered into anything he decided in a case. He was impartial, but as was mentioned before, he wasn't unaffected by where he came from, what he knew from real life. And I'll give one example of that. As someone who knew firsthand from World War II what fascism was about, Judge Aldisert was suspicious of government power, particularly the power of the federal prosecutors and the FBI. Nowhere more clearly expressed than in his dissent in the Abscam case. The Abscam case was a sting operation in Philadelphia that many of you may remember. In his dissent, he said, "The division of the court in this extremely important entrapment case reflects fundamental and irreconcilable differences in the values attached to two primary integrants of the American tradition of justice. To what extent should federal judges assume the responsibility for protecting American justice traditions? And to what extent should federal judges endorse tactics of the kind used by the FBI in this case?" The majority opinion reads like a paean to the FBI for its conduct in this case. But as an American citizen and a federal judge, I find that conduct revolting. The judge was probably more upset about the Abscam affirmance than any case that I saw him review. Another dissent we had was involved the use of city money when Pope John Paul II visited Philadelphia. It was a church and state separation case. The city had used about $200,000 of public money to build a stage from which the Pope, among other things, said Mass. Two of the judges, Judges Rosen and Garth, went against him, and he dissented, one of the very first dissents I worked on. We explored not just the history of the Vatican and its secular functions, but also the state of Israel, and then the newly established Islamic Republic of Islam. I loved it. He wrote, "I do not disagree that the platform," meaning the platform for the Pope, "was used for a religious ceremony, but the lingering question is what would have occurred in the absence of a platform. Perhaps the archdiocese would have built one, but perhaps, as in Zaire, it would have depended on traditional modes of assuring safety for the Pope. In Justice Frankfurter's phrase, in light of these considerations, can it reasonably be said that no substantial non-ecclesiastical purpose relevant to a well-ordered social life exists?" I must answer that question negatively. Dissents were rare, as Judge Aldisert valued collegiality and other attributes of the judicial process. But I recall, recite, and even use his test for when he would dissent, one of his most precise, intellectual, and rigorous tests of all. He would say, "Does the majority opinion make the blood rush to my neck?" Otherwise, he would probably join the majority, rarely, but occasionally making a comment in concurrence. The judge loved Pitt Law School and the university. He loved his students. I don't know if they appreciated the stature that he had and his gift of teaching. It was all here. His lessons were invaluable. He taught his clear teaching on the limits of judicial power, the proper lane in which the judiciary operates, the standard of review and how it should be derived from administrative decisions to trial court decisions, jury verdicts, and the like. The judge taught what was necessary for the judicial process to fill the role it was meant to fill and to maintain its legitimacy by not overstepping that role, not usurping power, but also not failing to exercise that power when it properly belonged in the courts. It's remarkable what an impact just 2 years in my career, less than 5% of my professional career, what those 2 years had on me, and I suspect most of you who clerked for him. The professional responsibility of working in the close confines of chambers on Grant Street and in Philadelphia went beyond just working for the judge in what he thought of as our little law firm. It became much more. What a rare experience we had when we were in Philadelphia during court week. There we were, the judge, Mrs. Aldisert, who insisted we call her Agatha, one or two of his fellow judges sitting around a table at a Philadelphia restaurant. I remember dinners with Judge Hunter, his very favorite fellow Marine, Leon Higginbotham, his dear friend. And one that stood out for me because he also was a Chicagoan is Chief Judge Howard Markey from the Federal Circuit. He was actually General Markey. And while he was from the Army, the judge didn't hold that against him. Sometimes it was just the judge, Agatha, the clerks, and maybe Ginny or Kathy as secretary. We experienced many kindnesses and more from the judge in our time in Pittsburgh. They were the first ones to come to the hospital when my son was born and my wife was very, very ill. He held my son when he was 2 days old. I'm sure we can all tell those law clerks can tell many personal stories about the judge and the many kindnesses we experienced. We had a full life as law clerks. The times were magical. We built a lifetime of friendship, as we experienced even today at lunch. When we see each other, we pick up where we left off many years ago. We are better lawyers, better teachers, better citizens, and better people for being in those chambers for those 2 years. It's an honor to be a member of that family of clerks. So Dean, I offer you thanks for putting this together, and John, congratulations to the 2 judges who are honorees. I thank you very much for allowing me to share a few memories with the judge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean. Now I'm going to invite Judge Mary Jane Bowes to join us. She is also, in addition to being a judge on the Superior Court, our current president of UPLA, our Pitt Alumni Association. So please join me in welcoming Judge Bowes to introduce our next honoree.
Thank you, Dean. And good afternoon. It is with high honor and a great pleasure that I approach this podium to speak on behalf of my former colleague and now boss, but still my friend, Justice Debra Todd. Today, Justice Todd will be named a distinguished Aldisert jurist by the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. I unfortunately did not have the opportunity to know Judge Aldisert, but I do know Justice Todd. And as we reflect on the life and legacy of Judge Aldisert, his scholarly writing, his high intellect, his wisdom and experience, it is fitting and proper that Justice Debra Todd, along with her fellow honoree, Judge Scirica, be foremost on the minds of those who follow in his footsteps. There are many pathways to a legal career. Some follow their parents. Others decide to pursue law during or after college, or even after another career. But with Debra Todd, the desire to seek a legal career developed at a young age, and like an arrow shot straight and true, the love of the law found its home in her heart and in her mind. Guided by her loving parents, but forging a pathway all her own, Debra exercised single-minded devotion in her avowed purpose to become a lawyer. A true daughter of Pennsylvania, Debra absorbed the foundational lessons of life: integrity, honesty, hard work, and discipline, and applied them in every chapter of her life. She readied herself at Chatham College, where she studied political science and drama, which I always thought was a great background for a lawyer, graduating, of course, with honors. Luckily for us, she chose the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. While here, she was named to Law Review, authored 2 publications, interned at the district attorney's office, and served as a research assistant. Eager to begin her career, she joined U.S. Steel Corporation, where she worked as in-house litigation counsel for 5 years, and she then entered the private practice of law for the next 12. Debra had an outstanding career in Pittsburgh as a renowned civil litigator, handling major complex litigation. I didn't know her, but I knew of her. She had an outstanding reputation. But even in the midst of her thriving practice, she always found time for pro bono legal work for the less fortunate and service to community and charitable organizations. Along the way, she married the love of her life, Stephen Todd, and together with their daughter, Alexandra, they were living the American dream. But still, life had more in store for her. While her legal career was the culmination of a long-held dream, her true destiny lay beyond the practice of law. In 1999, Debra believed that she could positively impact the wider society by seeking a judgeship. And as the citizens of Pennsylvania got to know her, enraptured by her sunny personality, impressed by her legal acumen, and eager to have her decide their cases, they elected her to the Superior Court of Pennsylvania. Now, I think we would all agree that the legal profession is a demanding one, and the judiciary is also a demanding one, but in its own way. A seasoned litigator has the incredible responsibility of vindicating a client's legal rights, making injured parties whole, convincing a judge or jury of the righteousness of her position, and then sustaining her win or reversing her loss before those pesky appellate courts. But the judiciary has its own demands too. Such stress and demands include struggling with weighty issues of import, liberty interests, cases of first impression, the effort to reconcile competing or conflicting precedents, the need to understand often opaque arguments, and sometimes wading through just plain bad lawyering, with all of it done as quickly as possible. The person we are celebrating here today made it all look easy. Judge Todd joyfully served on the Superior Court for 8 years, hearing and deciding all manners of cases that fell within its jurisdiction. She dissected the briefs, untangled the law, devised an apt approach, and crafted a writing that was crisp, clear, and concise. Judge Aldisert once said, if a judge wants to write clearly and cogently, the judge must first think clearly and cogently. Judge Todd hit the mark. Her writing was like looking through crystalline water and seeing all the way to the bottom. Her finished product was so logical that it seemed to write itself, but we all know the difficulty and long hours that went into it. The work was hard, but the reading was easy. And that is the ultimate goal of a judicial decision, a result that is understandable and easy to follow, so that the lawyers and the trial judges from Conshohocken to Connoquenessett can apply it to future cases. Judge Todd did it flawlessly, employing her high intellect, her boots on the ground experience as a seasoned litigator, and her graceful writing. Intellectually curious, she seized upon an opportunity to earn an LLM from the University of Virginia School of Law, all the while maintaining a full judicial load on one of the busiest appellate courts in the country. Her significant in-depth legal experience, her highly acclaimed judgeship on the Superior Court, and her advanced legal education all positioned her for service on the highest court in this state, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. In 2007, Justice Todd decided to throw her hat into the ring for a vacant seat. Applying the same grit and determination that she had shown during her entire career, she easily found a home on that high court. And she was only the second woman in the long history of that court to be elected to that bench. Her jurisprudence on the Supreme Court reveals a justice who applies the law fairly and impartially, according to the cherished ideals enshrined in our Constitution and in the rule of law, and includes notable decisions too numerous to mention. But just a few will reveal the depth and breadth of her scholarship. In 2014, Justice Todd penned a vigorous dissent to a plurality decision in Commonwealth versus Gary, which applied the federal automobile exception to the warrant requirement in Pennsylvania. Justice Todd compellingly argued that such a search violated Article 1, Section 8 of the Pennsylvania Constitution and, quote, the unyielding protection against unreasonable search and seizure, which our people have enjoyed as their birthright, end quote. She wrote a scholarly, thorough, and convincing analysis of the Edmund factors, and her voice was heard in 2020 when the Supreme Court revisited Gary and Commonwealth versus Alexander and fully adopted her dissenting position. A few other recently authored decisions include League of Women Voters versus Commonwealth, where Justice Todd, writing for the court, wrote in finding that the Pennsylvania Congressional Redistricting Act of 2011 was an unconstitutional gerrymander that infringed on the right to vote. She wrote, quote, "The people of this Commonwealth should never lose sight of the fact that in its protection of essential rights, our founding document is the ancestor and not the offspring of the federal Constitution." In League of Women Voters versus De Graaf and Reed, which was the Marsy's Law case, Justice Todd for the court held that the manner in which the proposed constitutional amendments were presented together, quote, "denied the voters of this Commonwealth their right to vote on each change separately, a sacrosanct right that our organic charter of governance guarantees," end quote. As can be seen by just these few decisions, Justice Todd is unafraid to grapple with and decide cases of significant constitutional import, and does so with the rights of the citizens firmly at the forefront of her decisions. She is ever mindful of the constant need to preserve and protect those rights, and ever ready to strike a blow for liberty. Throughout her legal and judicial career, Justice Todd's life has been a model of servant leadership. She has led numerous nonprofit and community organizations to aid the disadvantaged and to increase access to the courts. She has served the arts to nourish the soul, and she has committed her time and considerable talents, including her beautiful soprano voice, to her church for the greater honor and glory of God. She has received countless accolades and awards and honorary degrees. To hear the story of Debra Todd is to hear one of remarkable achievement. But the truly inspirational part of her story is how she accomplished what she did. Her hallmark has been a positive attitude and personal integrity in all that she does. As one who has been privileged to sit on the bench alongside her, I have seen firsthand how she extends kindness and a helping hand to attorneys struggling with their argument, or to colleagues and friends experiencing a difficult time. Justice Todd enthusiastically helps others and carries their burdens. She graciously and gratefully serves as Supreme Court liaison for the Advisory Council on Elder Justice in the Courts and Pennsylvania's Veterans Courts. In both conduct and word, she displays, in the words of Socrates, the essential qualities of a good judge. She hears courteously, answers wisely, considers soberly, and decides impartially. Notwithstanding the high office she holds, the mantle of authority rests easily upon her shoulders. But even more than that, she is a wonderful role model who instills civility, compassion, and kindness into our troubled world, and whose example calls us to do the same. It seems that destiny is not quite done with Madam Justice Todd, since she is in line to become the first Chief Justice of the oldest Supreme Court in the country. How will she do it? Effortlessly, with a smile on her face and a song in her heart. Congratulations, Justice Todd.
That is beautiful. Thank you. If I had any sense, I would just sit down. Judge Bose, that was the most beautiful introduction I have ever heard. And if my mother were still living, I would think that she wrote it and sent it to you. But wow, thank you. Thank you so much for that. You're a dear friend and a dear colleague. And I truly appreciated everything you said. And thank you very much, Dean. Thank you, Judge Fisher and the steering committee. And thank you, University of Pittsburgh,
for honoring me with this tremendous award in memory of Judge Aldisert, and along with the most distinguished Judge Scirica. You know, Ann Landers once said that at age 20, we worry about what people think of us. At age 40, we stop caring what people think of us. And at age 60, we discover they haven't been thinking of us at all. So thank you for thinking of me. I wanted to just introduce a couple people, if I may. Our distinguished current Chief Justice, Max Baer, is here with us today, and I was hoping that he would stand so that we could give him the recognition he deserves. Chief Justice Baer has had a long and distinguished career on not only on the Supreme Court, but starting out on the Common Pleas Court as head of the Family Division, and no one has done more for children in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania than Justice Baer. And then, of course, as a justice on the Supreme Court, and now as the Chief Justice. And as he looks forward to his well-deserved retirement in December, we all honor him and thank him for everything he has done for our court, for our justice system, and for the Commonwealth. So thank you, Chief Justice. And I didn't know that another of my colleagues had appeared, but Justice Christine Donahue is here. Thank you for coming, Justice. And I see judges, appellate judges, and of course, federal judges, and numerous judges here. So thank you for being here as well. I also wanted to mention my husband, Steve Todd, is here, as always, by my side, driving me, propping me up, whatever he needs to do. And lovingly, thank you, Steve. And my law clerks are here. We heard a lot about law clerks, and boy, oh boy, you can't do this job without law clerks. So could my law clerks and my chief assistant, Rhonda, could you stand, please? Thank you. And congratulations to Judge Scirica. I've only, as I said at the beginning before we came in here, I've only worshiped you from afar. Your reputation precedes you, and I've never had the opportunity to get to know you, but your career has been so outstanding and continues to be so, and no one could deserve this award more so than you, and I'm humbled to receive it along with you. So congratulations to you, sir. With respect to Judge Aldisert and Dr. Aldisert, your words were beautiful about your father. I did not have the opportunity to know your father firsthand. I certainly knew of him and heard him speak many times. I had the pleasure of being in a classroom in this very courtroom when I was a student at Pitt, and hearing him as a guest lecturer while I was a student here, and he was here with the Pips. Although, Jean, I saw the law clerks, perhaps you were one of them, but I did not know that you referred to yourself and others referred to you as the Pips. I did not. I was just totally impressed that Judge Aldisert had reached such heights in his profession that he had young men in suits carrying his document bags, walking behind him onto the bench. And I was very impressed by that. And I thought, well, that would be something to, arrive at such heights. But, I thought I would never arrive at those heights. And then last week, I was returning from Philadelphia where we had session, and I pulled up in front of my office in Oxford Center, and two of my clerks met me at my car and unloaded my document bags from Philadelphia session so that I could prepare to drive to Harrisburg for my next trip. And as I watched them carry my document bags into Oxford Center, I thought, Judge Aldisert, I've arrived. So actually, he did influence me even more than I knew. To tell you the truth, though, it was his scholarship and his writing that truly influenced me. His numerous law review articles and books. As we all know, he was a prolific and influential writer. Not surprisingly, even to this day, through his many written works, he positively impacts the bench and the bar. He is quoted so much in our judicial opinions on the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, and certainly in federal opinions. We advise lawyers how to write based on quotations from Judge Aldisert, how to identify issues and how many issues to list and not to list based on advice given by Judge Aldisert. And he was certainly among the top of the list of the jurists whose views will never be forgotten among jurists who write opinions. I especially appreciate receiving this award because it represents not only the career of Judge Aldisert, but the values he exemplified and which allowed him to leave such a wonderful legacy. His attributes were many, and his Pittsburgh roots came through in all that he accomplished. He was strong in his beliefs, he was passionate, obviously dedicated to his family and his work, and enthusiastic in all aspects of the law. Judge Aldisert set the bar high for all judges. I hope to uphold the ideals symbolized by this special award and to continue in Judge Aldisert's tradition in my years ahead as a justice on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. While I have the opportunity, I would like to say a few words about our Pennsylvania judiciary and about women in our judiciary. As many of you know, because we say it all the time, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is the oldest Supreme Court in the nation. While our court was formally established pursuant to the Judiciary Act of 1722, it was not until 1961 that the first woman was to serve on our court. And she was Justice Ann X. Alpern, who was appointed by Governor David Lawrence to fill an interim vacancy on the court. Yet, despite the progressive attitude of Governor Lawrence, it was not until over a quarter century later in 1988 that another woman would sit on the court. Justice Juanita Kidd Stout, also an interim appointee, became the second woman to serve on our court. And she was the first African-American woman to serve on the Supreme Court of any state. It was not until 1996, there are big gaps between these events. It was not until 1996, however, that Justice Sandra Schultz Newman from Philadelphia became the first woman elected to a full 10-year term on our Supreme Court. And in 2007, I was honored to become the second woman ever elected to a full term on the court. And God willing, I will become the first female Chief Justice of Pennsylvania in January. Now, along with my colleagues, Justice Christine Donahue and Justice Sally Mundy, of the current complement of 7 justices of the Supreme Court, 3 are women, and that's the first time that ever happened. The majority of the commission judges now serving on our Superior Court, I think the current number is 11 out of 14, and our Commonwealth Court, they've had a lot of women for a really long time. 6 out of 9, I believe, are women, and many of your senior judges are women. And the president judges of both of these courts have been women. Numerous women serve as trial judges throughout Pennsylvania, and many as president judges and administrative judges in their respective counties. So the slow but ultimate ascent of women as a crucial component of all of our courts is a sign of significant progress in bringing women's perspective and commitment to gender equality to the court. Progress that will assuredly continue far into the future. And that makes me very proud. So I thank you again. Thank you to the University of Pittsburgh. I have so many wonderful memories. I received my strong foundation here. I have goosebumps standing in this courtroom again, where I participated in mock trial and learned so much. And Dean, I thank you sincerely. Thank you to Judge Fisher and the steering committee. And thank you again, Judge Bose. We can make sure we hold it. So I want to raise your hands. So thank you.
All right, so now I'm going to invite up my good friend, my dear friend, John Getz, to give us a final tribute to Judge Aldisert.
Thank you very much for the honor of speaking today. And I wanted to thank Dean Amy and Judge Fisher, Bob Sinrich, Gene Schoon, and all of us on the committee who made today a reality after 4 years of planning. But here we are. And I wanted to also congratulate our 2 jurists who exemplify Judge Aldisert in so many ways. And we're honored to be with you. I am a partner in Jones Day's Pittsburgh office, and I served as a law clerk for Judge Aldisert from 1986 to 1988. I was the judge's first bi-coastal law clerk. My first year was in Pittsburgh when Judge Aldisert was the chief judge of the Third Circuit, and I spent my second year in Santa Barbara after the judge took senior status. The lessons that I learned from Judge Aldisert as a judge, mentor, and a friend have stayed with me constantly during my 34 years of practicing law. How to analyze legal issues, how to write briefs, how to prepare for oral arguments came from Judge Aldisert. How to practice law with passion, with a high purpose, and to do right by clients in the courts came from the judge. Why should we honor the legacy of Judge Aldisert permanently at this law school? You've heard many great reasons today. And respectfully, I will suggest 5 reasons to honor his legacy permanently. First, Judge Aldisert loved the law. The judge had an unquenchable thirst to know everything about the law, the elements of legal thinking, and the role of courts in contemporary society. He had an unparalleled respect for the judicial process. He approached every single case and every issue with passion and purpose. Second, the judge understood the importance of relationships in the law. The judge knew that law is more than dusty books, long list of case precedents, and metrics like hours and money. He taught that law is about relationships with your colleagues, with fellow judges on the state and federal courts, with beloved institutions like Pitt Law School and the University of Pittsburgh, and of course, with family and friends. Third, the judge valued his early life experiences, and we heard about them today. The judge was very proud of his upbringing in Carnegie and overcoming the prejudices of his time. He was proud of entering Pitt Law School in September of 1941. He was proud of then taking 4 years away from law school to serve in the Marine Corps during World War II in the Pacific. He was extremely proud of his service on the Court of Common Pleas of Allegheny County, and especially, as we've heard, serving as calendar control judge, and clearing the backlog of cases by granting no continuances to lawyers who were whining. That might have been one of them in my pen. How Judge Aldisert approached legal issues and cases were guided by all of these experiences. Fourth, the judge had his own style. He was unique as a judge, a person, and friend. And the Aldisert writing style was all his own. The judge's opinions and writings contained no formalistic, dry legal prose. Instead, they were full of life, always with a turn of phrase to drive home his point. Here are a few examples from his books. Quote, I have an abiding concern that most briefs from lawyers seem to have lost their way. Spewing case after case has replaced a tidy explanation of what is important to the case and a clean description of why it is important. A judge's advice. Many briefs today are too long, cover too many issues or points, and are rudderless with no central themes. Winning on appeal. The reader always knew exactly where the judge stood on issues from his clear to the point writing. Fifth, the judge was an outstanding role model. We've heard about that today. In addition to serving with distinction on the bench for over 50 years, the judge found time to teach at this law school for many years. He found time to join his law clerks for brown bag lunches and dinners, including during sittings, to discuss the issues of the day and whatever the law clerks wanted to talk with him about. He served as a mentor for countless lawyers starting their legal careers. He authored and co-authored nearly 100 scholarly articles in legal publications. He lectured all over the country and internationally, and he wrote multiple books, which I have, treasure, and the judge inscribed for me. So my ask to all of you today, and thank you for coming, is please help us keep Judge Aldisert's legacy alive at Pitt Law School. Make some time to study his opinions, articles, and books. The wisdom jumps off the page, and his insights still resonate today. Keep his accomplishments and memory alive. He was one of the most distinguished graduates of Pitt Law School. He was one of the most distinguished judges and lawyers in this city. He has much to share with the members of our bar and bench and with all of us here today. And with your support, the Aldisert Jurist in Residence program will become a permanent part of this law school to enrich its traditions and teachings. Thank you again for the honor of speaking today.
So I am now going to ask the best vice dean in America and the best colleague I could ever imagine. I'm going to ask Haider Hamoudi to come up and close us out for tonight. Haider, come on up.
Thanks, Amy, for those very generous remarks. It was funny. I don't know those of you who were aware, but when we had graduation last year, the dean actually had COVID. And so left to sort of run affairs was Dean Linsenmeyer, the dean of students, who we really just followed her directions. But Judge Bose and I were partners in crime. in this matter. And so Judge Bose was the last person to speak. So I took a look at the program. I said, Judge Bose, I just have one thing to tell you, which is these students who have just become lawyers have one person left to listen to before they go get their adult beverage. So you want to keep this relatively short. So then Judge Bose, of course, saw the program today, saw I was last, found me and said, I just want you to know. So I will take the advice and keep it as short as I can. The dean usually says you should have 3 points to make, so I'll just make 2, right? In the interest of keeping it short. I just wanted to say, first of all, congratulations both to Justice Todd as well as to Judge Scirica for, I can't imagine more well-deserving recipients of this award and of Judge Aldisert's legacy. And in addition to that, I really just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to the clerks. As a former clerk myself, I really do appreciate having heard these kinds of fitting tributes for your judge, and I could really hear the loyalty. Thank you to Dr. Aldisert for your very warm introduction as well, who really gave me an opportunity to understand who Judge Aldisert was as a person. I came to the law school and just generationally, I didn't have the opportunity to learn as much from Judge Aldisert as many of you did. And by the way, if someone could find me afterwards and tell me what a PIP is, I'd really appreciate it. But I really felt that I learned a great deal about Judge Aldisert from all of you, and really a great deal about a highly accomplished and really brilliant jurist whose reputation precedes him, and who lived and led a well-lived life. So thank you very much for that opportunity to really understand him. I know I have a lot of reading to do now. I really will intend to do that. I'm just going to wrap it up and thank all of you for coming and ask you all to come to the first floor where we will have a reception with some food and drinks.